evening, members of council, ladies and gentlemen, staff. I see that we have quorum, and I call this regular meeting for the town of Pelham for Tuesday, May 22nd, 2018, to order. Before we sing our national anthem, I would ask that we undertake a moment of silence for a very influential person in our town that recently passed away. This is for George Alsop. George was a longtime farmer, employee of John Deere Welland, but he was also the deputy reeve of the village of Fenwick Council and was vice chair of the local school board, the last vice chair of that local school board. George is survived by his wife, Bernice, really a fixture in the Fenwick area, the western part of our town. I can recall certainly when the reconstruction was occurring in downtown Fenwick that he would drive his scooter there to oversee what was going on. And the flagpole, staff will remember that when the flagpole was there and Ewing Flagpoles was there to fix and improve the historic flagpole, that he was there overseeing that and actually talking to school children about that work and the use of that flagpole and the importance of the flagpole. And council will also remember Mr. Alsop when we were discussing in late 2013 to early 2014 the redevelopment and the potential regarding Maple Acre, and he was the one that stood up and said, essentially, if council wants to do this, council can do it. And I think that encouraged each of us to redevelop the Maple Acre Library. So I would ask that we take a moment of silence now and remember George Alsop. Thank you. I have passed council's condolences on to his widow, Bernice, and we certainly recognize George's many contributions to our community, so thank you. Now we'll start by the singing of the national anthem, and Councillor Papp, if you could lead us, and all who are able, please rise.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you all. Thank you, Councillor Papp. Now we move on to approval of the agenda. It's been moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Lane, that the agenda for the May 22nd, 2018 regular meeting of council be adopted. Mr. CAO, you had a request that an item be removed from the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, the staff report entitled Custodial Services 11.2.1. New information has been received, and unfortunately we weren't able to pull that off and amend it prior to the statutory requirements of the meeting, so I would request council remove that, and we'll update it and bring it back when it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Durling. The amendment, all those in favor? Any opposed? Amendment carries, and that's removed. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Okay, I'm going to call the question on the amended agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries as amended. Next on the agenda is the disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. That's any conflicts of interest that any members of council may have. Do any members have any conflicts of interest on any of the items on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor.
No? Okay, can that be so noted? I have none either. So now we'll move to presentations, and we have a few presentations. It's great to see the high level of activity going on in our community, so thanks very much to all who are here. First, we have a presentation by David Compson regarding a very exciting development that's coming up with a, I don't want to say it, well, I'll say it. I'll let the cat out of the bag with a medical center. So thanks very much, David, for being here. And I know Christina can't be here this evening, but I'll turn it over to you. So
Thank you for having me, your worship, and counselors and staff. I was invited this evening to formally declare publicly that we have an agreement of purchase and sale on a piece of land within the East Fonthill Secondary Plan, which is reflected as Part 2, for purposes of developing a medical health and wellness hub to serve the community of Fonthill and by extension Pelham and its hamlets. So I'm here to answer any questions. We're very excited. It's been a long journey,
yes.
starting perhaps around 16 months ago, believe it or not. And I certainly have to extend credit to the mayor, to the council, and also noteworthy to the CAO of the town and Barbara Weens. There was a time many, many months ago when we weren't quite sure whether or not we were going to be able to bring this important initiative within the town of Pelham. And several individuals, representatives of the town, reached out to us upon hearing somehow of our evolving development and invited us to speak, which we did. The location that we've agreed upon was always within what we considered to be rather, we still refer to as center ice. There were some challenges months ago with the town's initiative to sell all of the available lands, which precluded our ability to engage with the town of Pelham. And once that course expired, we immediately re-engaged with the town and struck a mutually acceptable agreement of purchase and sale. So we're very, very excited about it.
Great. Thank you very much. Maybe before I open it up to questions from council, if you could just explain how many doctors, what else you're working on in that area, and how many square feet, those kind of
Okay.
metrics, please.
Certainly.
Thank you.
I can tell you, with all of the development activity that's taking place within the surrounding areas, that the scale and scope of the final development really has not been firmly established yet. But I can tell you that at a minimum, our intention is to build a ground floor of 20 to 22,000 square feet, occupied predominantly by medical health and wellness top category professionals, including physicians, of course. And the second floor, depending on level of inquiry, which we expect to be quite robust, quite honestly. We have extensive media releases going out this week, which we anticipate to create a lot of positive energy and inquiry into the development. So hopefully we can, and we're somewhat confident that we'll be able to generate some interest from specialists, medical specialists, ranging from radiology, pulmonology, all of the allergies, to create for the town of Pelham what will ultimately become the hub. I always come back to that word. When we discuss internally our vision, we always refer to it as a hub, a destination within what I personally refer to as a legacy building. A legacy building, for me, refers to a building that has tremendous exterior appeal and professional design standards, and an interior environment that will make our clients proud to be there. Firstly, it'll make the guests and patients proud and confident in the facility and the services that are rendered from within, and also a legacy building that the town of Pelham will be proud of for decades to come. That's what I mean when I say a legacy building. Spending, as developers, you always have budgets. Legacy buildings tend to require higher budgets. But for us, you know, we have what we consider to be an extraordinary budget for both the exterior of the building and the interior of the building. A wow factor. Additionally, speaking to scope and scale, we are measuring right now the market for additional floors. But I can't stand here today and promise you a higher density or more vertical building. Mm-hmm. We're very, very sensitive to critical massing, first and foremost with the medical, health, and wellness professionals, and that's our starting point.
That's great.
So I think at a minimum, we're certainly looking at 22 to 35,000 square feet with perhaps a maximum of 60,000 square feet. Yet to be determined.
Thank you very much. Members of council, it's obviously great news for the community. I know it's something that's people have been talking about for a number of years.
Yes.
And so we're very pleased to work together with you on this and have an agreement of purchase and sale for it. Do members of council have any questions for Mr. Clompson at this time? Councillor Papp?
Very quickly, we're ecstatic about this, but let me not put words in your mouth, but there's still some formal legal steps we have to go through. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, it's just so we all have an understanding of that, but we're ecstatic that we've reached this stage.
We are as well.
Thank you.
And to that, just to give some additional information to council and senior staff, according to the agreement of purchase and sale, I believe our waiver of conditions date is June 11th.
Okay.
And we certainly intend on waiving our conditions as we move forward. There's a few housekeeping items that we have to address, but they're relatively minor,
That's great.
in our opinion.
That's great news. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Thank you.
We have, just so you know, formally engaged our civil engineer to put together our preliminary site plan. As you can see, the parcel's somewhat irregularly shaped.
Right.
So it does present some challenges in terms of building footprint and parking. But we're working through that. I anticipate the building, the bulk of the building to be running along Rice and then elbowing along Shaw Avenue, soon to be renamed Meridian Way. That's how I think the building will eventually be laid out. And of course, we have some other issues that we have to deal with in terms of ingress, egress.
Right.
Okay.
Very
Any other
good.
questions?
Thank you very much. Any other
We're
questions?
excited. Thanks for having us here.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr.
And I
Clompson.
do
We appreciate
apologize
it.
for Christina not being able to attend.
No.
Her
okay.
fiance is receiving a fairly prestigious award.
Well, congratulations to
He's
him.
a civil servant, police officer.
Oh, very good. Congratulations to him, and thanks for the service. Thank you very much for your presentation this evening. We greatly appreciate it and look forward to working with you to get all those conditions dealt with and that signed off, and this become a reality for our community.
Okay,
Thank
you
you
all.
so much.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So while the clerk is just going to be changing the presentation here. Thank you very much. That's good news. Now we have some other good news. We have Mr. Gibson and Mr. Al-Fashni here who are going to be making a presentation. Please come on up. Thank you for joining us this evening. It's good to see you again.
Yes. want to start?
I guess so.
Okay. Like the previous presentation, we're pretty excited about this development here in the town of Pelham as well. So thank you, Mr. Mayor and the council, for having us back. I know it's been not as long of a process, pretty short when all things considering, a few months, but everybody that's involved, thank you for that. So for us, I'll give a bit of background pretty quickly. This is Sammer, Mr. Alfashni, and my name's Dustin. And so I work for Sammer. Sammer is the developer, and he has owned and operated numerous retirement homes and long-term care homes within Ontario. In this area, he used to own the Orchards retirement residence in Vineland, and that sold to Chartwell in February of 2017. And he currently owns Villa de Rose retirement residence in Welland. But he also owns one up in Bracebridge and a long-term care home up in Burlington. And for myself, I've worked with Sammer now almost 7 years in different roles, but currently I am his general manager at Villa de Rose, former general manager at the Orchards, and I overlook the projects. I'm sort of his site lead. So why did we choose East Fonthill? A big one is obviously the community center that's in its final stages of being developed now, with that proposed medical center that we just heard about as well for us. It's in a nice area. It's recently developed. There's a lot of newer buildings, and so we did choose this area for one of those reasons as well. Its proximity to the Wellsprings Niagara Cancer Center, and obviously down along Rice Road, there's all those new developments happening with housing. But for us and for what we want to envision with the town of Pelham, Fonthill here, is the land was already zoned appropriately for what we require, and so with that being said, what we're proposing on this area, and I know Sammer is finishing up the legal side of things, but for us to put a retirement home, some seniors apartment buildings, and a long-term care facility, this zoning was perfect. It encompasses all of that, and so that was one of our reasons as well for approaching the town. The area that we are looking, I guess, finishing up due diligence and purchasing is the section highlighted here in yellow. So it is directly across the street from the new community center that's being built and the medical center that's being proposed, that hub as well. The specific site plan, we don't have anything worked on obviously yet, but we do obviously want to put in a retirement home, long-term care, and seniors apartments or condos in this area. With anything right now senior related, I know the ministry has a big push with aging in place, and that's what we want to see here as well. I know in numerous discussions with the town and members of council, we wanted to have sort of that aging in place. So you could go from a completely independent building to a different building or facility that has different levels of care, whether that's assisted living, memory care, or just an independent facility where you could still utilize different services but not have to worry about cooking your meals or worrying about housekeeping. So what we're looking at doing here is two different phases. So phase one would be sort of a two-parter, where we would have seniors apartments with a commercial aspect of it on the ground floor. This we would look at having around that new urban square, that area, and so commercial, again, leading into that. And then the other side of the phase one, probably similar or relatively close to the apartments, would be a 140-bed retirement home, offering, again, independent, assisted, and memory care living. The phase two would be a little bit further down the road, once we get ministry approval for it, would be a 192-bed long-term care facility. And so for the phases, ideally phase one we would like to see happen sooner than later. So we're hoping for spring, summer of 2019. And phase two probably happening a little bit further down the line because it has to go through the Ministry of Health. So probably spring, summer, or summer, fall of 2021 happening for that. Just briefly with the seniors apartments, again, looking at more of that independent living where they're just in an area that does have some security, which might tie in maybe to the retirement home, that they might be able to access some of those services, such as meal planners, for example, where they can go for dinner certain nights of the week, housekeeping services, etc. The difference here would be apartments or condos, you're allowed to more have the kitchens and that kind of thing, where in the retirement home we wouldn't have that, where our staff would provide that service. And again, adjacent to the retirement residence. Some conceptual designs. Again, we haven't got this far in the process, but just an idea for some visuals. And then here's a big part of this phase one, the 140 suite retirement residence. Here we'd add some dimension and some height. So we'd be looking at around 4 or 5 stories probably to start. Potentially we might have it designed so that we can add up later on if we needed to, but for now we're just looking at probably that height. With the assisted and memory care living, we would obviously design that to be secured floors if they required it for more of the Alzheimer's dementia residents, and so they would be secured areas. And then 24-hour nursing, PSW assistants. Some key, I guess, amenities that we would have here would be a private dining room, family-style kitchens or baking areas, a theater, chapel, recreation and gym facilities, a cafe, gardens, patio spaces, etc. We'd be looking at providing employment to between 50 and 75 employees, again, driving and bringing in those healthcare professionals with an estimated cost between 20 and 25 million. Again, some conceptual ideas of what we could see happening here. Again, adding more of taking into what the town's already developing. We don't want to really go away from that, but bringing in an upscale curb appeal as well. And then phase 2 is that long-term care facility. In our discussions with Local Health Integration Network, also known as LIN, formerly CCAC, and the Ministry of Health, they have said that Fonthill has been an area on their list of being favored for long-term care development. We would offer a combination of private and semi-private units here with, again, large walking paths, gardens, patio areas. There might be a component there where we can add a daycare for seniors, or day program for those Alzheimer's dementia patients that are still able to live at home, but just need maybe some services throughout the day. And providing employment between 125 to 150 employees, again, healthcare professionals that we're bringing into the area, and with an estimated cost between $35 and $40 million. Conceptual designs, again, haven't got this far, but just some ideas. And then in summary, we're going to be doing 140 suite retirement residence, 192 bed long-term care and seniors apartments, looking at between 200 and 250 healthcare professionals that we're bringing into the town, adding approximately $60 million in development to the town of Pelham, and again, 2 phases that we'll be looking at doing.
That's great. Thank you very much for your presentation, and of course, we're working together with you as well on that land sale.
Yes.
We are very excited about this as well, and we've been, as you indicated, we've been working a little bit over the last couple of months.
Yes.
About this. I wonder if members of council have any questions or comments that they'd questions for Mr. Gibson or Mr. Al-Fashni. Councillor Pop?
As usual, very ecstatic and very pleased about this development, that we've come to this stage. And I know, as you stated, as you heard me before, there's still some legal areas that we have to settle up. I don't think they're unsurmountable. The key thing is that I think you're going to hear from us later that we want to work very closely with you and the LIN, and I'm sure the mayor, to push for, because it is a process, as you know, to have them transfer the beds and also get the additional long-term care beds. So I guess you could say that, not just me personally, but I think all of our councillors would agree, would work very closely and offering and talking to the LIN to say that we want a very much more formal, how can I say, approval, that those beds be not only allocated for the new beds, but also the transfer of the existing beds from Burlington. The other part that comes out of this is that besides the $60 million that you're investing in, there's the offset of those people that are working here will buy goods and services here. They'll avail themselves of all the commercial retail, and can't put a number on it, but we're going to be, I know the CAO and economic development will be watching, because lots of stuff going on. We hope that they'll shop here, live here, and buy here. So quite excited, and congratulations.
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. We're very excited with this. Speaking to people on the street, this is just what the doctor ordered, so to speak. going to be very welcome. A lot of people are asking for this, and this, along with the Dovesey report from earlier, I'm sure that that's going to make this a very valuable asset to our community, not only the town of Pelham, but probably the whole region. And thank you very much for bringing this forward.
Thank you. Anyone else? Just want to add and sort of build on the comments of a couple of councillors and sort of on behalf of the rest of council. There are discussions in other parts of Niagara about long-term care beds and redevelopment sites and the concept of having a long-term care facility sort of separate and distinct and not linked with other developments, and saying how that was done in the past, and now the way to move forward is to have a very active community, a more complete community around those long-term care beds or retirement homes and things like that. So we were delighted when you came forward with this proposal, and it's well thought out and going to work. And that kind of cluster or campus style idea with the medical, with the long-term care, the retirement, with the amenities, as Councillor Durley indicated, the recreation, all together in one location, and other activities that will be going on in that, it really creates a synergy. And so we appreciate working together with you and partnering with you on this, and we look forward to that deal closing as well in a few short weeks. So thank you very much. And as Councillor Papp, I just want to underscore that we will also be assisting with the effort to get those long-term care beds. So we want to work with you and be a partner with you on that, because it's extremely important, as Councillor Durley indicated, to the community.
We appreciate that.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks again. So now we have a hard act to follow. We have a presentation from Niagara Region coming up. We have Doug Giles and David Hayworth, who are going to be talking about the new regional official plan. Unless you have more good news you want to tell us right off the hop.
Sorry, we haven't come with any developments in Canada
Okay.
in the future.
But that's the whole idea behind official plans, to try to shape a community. So
Exactly.
it does fit in. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors, staff, and residents. My name is Doug Giles. I'm the Director of Community and Long-Range Planning at the region. My colleague is Dave Hayworth. He is the official plan policy consultant responsible for overseeing the preparation of the new regional official plan. Tonight, what we're going to do is give you basically an overview of the work that we're doing for the new regional official plan. I'm going to give a very brief overview and give some context to the background of this, and then Dave will get into some more of the details. Just to give you some context, the current regional official plan was first approved in about 1973 when the region was established. Since then, there hasn't been a comprehensive review of this document. There have been updates to the chapters over the course of time, but there hasn't been a comprehensive overhaul of the entire document. In the past, so what that does when you don't have a comprehensive review is, as you update chapters at a time, basically a lot of chapters are and policies are connected through these documents. And as you update chapters at a time, you lose some of that connectedness. One of the other characteristics of this current regional official plan is, in the past, the official plan was predominantly focused on issues outside of the urban areas. So, predominantly rural agricultural issues, because that's what the region's role was. Up until recently, there's been a lot of changes to planning policy at the provincial level. There's been the introduction of the new growth plan, Niagara Escarpment Plan, the Greenbelt Plan. There's been new regulations coming through the Planning Act. So there's been a lot of changes. So the Regional Council, about a year ago, approved us to start on a total revision of the new regional official plan. And that's what we're here to talk to you about tonight. So moving forward, doing a new regional official plan at this level is not an easy thing to do. There are a lot of things to consider. And it's a process that's going to take some time. We have a 5-year process. We're about 1 year through that. The completion date is basically December 2021. So we do have a lot of work in front of us. There's going to be a lot of new things in the new regional official plan that aren't considered now. A lot of those areas are areas where the province says the region now has responsibility and oversight for. So that's the direction we're heading, and I'll hand it over to Dave now, who will get into a bit more of the details.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council and staff, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come before you this evening. It's always nice to come and speak to our municipal partners. So we have some preliminary objectives that we're dealing with the new official plan. We want to promote and achieve great development outcomes that contribute to complete community solutions and an authentic urban experience. We want to facilitate opportunities for economic growth, protect regional, natural, and agriculture resources, and adequately respond to the challenges of climate change. Provide clear policy direction where necessary and discretion where appropriate. And address provincial requirements, regional mandate matters, and provide guidance to the local area municipalities. The new official plan will be processed under Section 26 of the Planning Act. In terms of initiation, it was back in November 2016 that the Regional Planning and Economic Development Committee approved the overall staff resources for completing the new official plan over the next 5 years. A special meeting of council will be held July 5th, 2018, to hear how the public envisions Niagara growing and developing to 2041, and that's kind of a step under the Planning Act that we do. The advertisements have just gone out into all the papers, and we'll be sending that out to all the local municipalities to put on their websites if they wish, and it'll all be advertised through social media at the region. In the meantime, the region, with the input of area planners, has been framing required priority background studies to inform the new official plan. So you've probably heard a lot about the municipal comprehensive review process, which was all related to growth management in terms of allocating population numbers set down by the province to the local municipalities and land needs assessment, etc. So the municipal comprehensive review process now, because of the changes to the provincial planning documents, is the OP official plan process itself. And it includes all that growth management work, plus it ties into all the other aspects of the official plan, natural heritage, agriculture, et cetera, because everything is interrelated. So our process is to do the background studies that are required, draft policies out of that. The background studies inform the drafting of the official plan policies, and then that's all incorporated into the regional official plan. So in terms of the general process for doing the background studies, for the most part, you'll see the collection of background information. At the end of that, there'll be public input and stakeholder input. Options development, there'll be input, public consultation as well, recommendation stage, input, consultation, and then policy. And when we draft the policy, there's going to be consultation as well. This slide is basically to show the interrelationships of all the key priority background studies, and we show it as pieces of the puzzle because that's the way the official plan has to be set out under the new provincial requirements. Everything is interrelated. So the key priority background studies we're doing is the land budget, which is the land needs assessment, employment land strategy, urban structure, housing strategy. That's under the growth management program section. Under the natural systems and resource program, agriculture, natural environment, aggregate resources, and climate change. So in talking about the growth management portion of the program, the land budget, employment lands, urban structure, and housing strategy. And they're all interrelated. Basically, under the guidance material from the province, urban structure employment lands and certain components of the housing strategy have to be done to a certain level to inform the land needs assessment. Everything is integrated. In terms of the land needs assessment, it's the amount of developable urban land needed for residential and employment purposes to 2041. We'll identify any excess lands not developable by 2041. Excess lands will need to be designated for development post 2041. Guidance material has come out from the province, as I mentioned. Alternative greenfield density targets to the required 80 people and jobs per hectare can be requested to the province. That's one of the first important components of completing the land needs assessment. The new regional official plan does allow an opportunity to rationalize urban boundaries and ensure that sufficient lands are in the proper location to accommodate growth. Urban area boundary expansions can take place even if there are excess lands, provided policies are in place to de-designate excess lands from the overall regional urban land supply. And that's where the rationalization takes place. Employment land strategy ensures sufficient and marketable supply for traditional industrial employment. Identify regional employment areas. The region is currently working with the local municipalities, specifically area planners at this stage on that identification. The project will be informed by the region's annual employment inventory, and with the confirmation of employment areas, a market assessment will be undertaken to analyze the viability of the identified employment areas. So we want to identify employment areas that are to be protected in the regional plan, which are protected from conversion, and we want to protect the ones that are marketable and can be developed. Urban structure, another important component of the land needs assessment. The urban structure is a significant component to achieve an eventual 60% intensification rate under the growth plan while protecting established neighborhoods. It identifies a hierarchy of settlement areas, will identify important regional intensification areas to direct growth to areas best served by a combination of transportation, transit, public works, and community infrastructure and services. And we will assign population and density accordingly to that urban structure. And right now we've been discussing with area planners basically some kind of preliminary components of the urban structure, having those those areas identified for the intensification where you want to put most of your built boundary intensification and development. So the downtown St. Catharines Urban Growth Center, downtown Niagara Falls and downtown Welling emerging urban centers, the major GO transit station areas, which of course makes sense where we've done some secondary plannings around where the GO transit stations will be, other regional growth areas, and they can be areas that are identified through the district plan process, like the Brock district plan or the Glendale district plan that we're doing now, where there's going to be a lot of intensification. And then we have other regional corridor areas where you're along a regional highway and that or regional corridor, and that regional corridor maybe connects other urban communities within other municipalities. Those areas that are in the urban area adjacent to those corridors can be identified for somewhat higher intensification to take advantage and utilize public transit. And then we have local centers and local corridors. And this is preliminary at this point in time, and we're just putting this out there for your information and to see the thought process of where we're heading. Housing strategy, we want to promote an appropriate range and mix of housing forms, promote choice, aging and place opportunities and affordability, set affordable ownership and rental housing targets, identify tools to support affordable housing, align with the Housing and Homelessness Action Plan, and support complete communities. And the points related to affordable housing are requirements under the growth plan, the provincial growth plan. So that's our growth management component. Then we also have our Rural and Natural Systems Management Program, which are all aspects that are interrelated: agriculture, natural environment, aggregates, and climate change. For the agricultural framework, we want to recognize agriculture as a primary driver of the regional economy, protect the unique land, update specific policies such as agricultural related and on-farm diversified uses to support the interest of the local agricultural industry, and ensure conformity and supportive policies for the agricultural economy and industry. What we heard at one-on-one meetings, what I should mention also is when we prepared these frameworks, we prepared high-level preliminary frameworks, and then we went and discussed them all with area planners and got their input from the local perspective that we could then incorporate into finalizing the frameworks. So as we did these frameworks for agriculture in the one-on-one meetings, what we heard were concerns regarding viability of certain agricultural lands, discussions regarding refinements to the province's agricultural systems mapping, concerns about how wineries are addressed in the Niagara Escarpment Plan and province's permitted uses guidelines, importance of agricultural impact assessment, importance of compatibility between regional natural heritage system and agricultural system, and concerns about use of greenhouses for cannabis. So these are points that we obviously will take into consideration as we develop the background material and look at options, etc. Natural environment and water systems planning. It's a significant, huge component of the regional official plan because basically what you're protecting from a natural heritage perspective, particularly in the urban area, determines almost where you can grow. It is recognized that accurate mapping and appropriate methods to interpret and update mapping is critical and is planned to be discussed early. Watershed planning is required to ensure water resources and stormwater management are properly addressed. Assess natural heritage and water systems options for policy and mapping. Establish criteria and identify features for provincial compliance. And develop watershed planning policy framework. And what we heard on one-on-one area planners meetings was mapping was identified as an important issue for all, and that's why we've moved it up very early in the process in terms of in part of the early discussion paper. Interconnectedness with watershed planning is important. Range of concerns related to woodlands. What is a significant woodland? How are you going to assess that? Specific topics for consideration: offsetting, shorelines, watercourse mapping. And then education is a priority component of the engagement process. In terms of aggregate resources are located throughout the region and are essential to the economy. Extraction of the resource is necessary, and there's a need to address land use compatibility. An amendment to update the aggregate resources policies in the regional official plan initiated through Imagine Niagara will be carried forward as a section of the new regional official plan. State of aggregates in the Niagara region background report was brought to Committee and Council for information in November 2015 and then January 2016. And then at the time of doing the PowerPoint, a technical addendum has been completed to supplement the background work as a result of changes to the provincial plans, etc. And that's been approved, and we will get into the policy formulation for the aggregate section. It's a little further ahead than the other background studies because it was started quite a while ago, and it just had to be updated for provincial plan conformity. Next step, policy development. We want to prepare draft official plan policies. The policies will be presented to the technical aggregate group and planning advisory committee that we've just formed at the region of community members, as well as industry stakeholders and provincial ministries and the public. And then the final aggregate policies will be endorsed by the committee and council. And that's a similar process to the rest of the frameworks that we've talked about. For climate change, there will be opportunities for climate change adaptation and mitigation. Climate change guidance will be integrated through the new regional official plan. A climate change study will assess obligations and options on the region's role relative to greenhouse gas emission targets. From a provincial policy analysis, this slide basically shows how everything in terms of the provincial growth plan and the provincial plans relate, the changes made relate to addressing climate change. So complete communities, infrastructure, public transportation, having intensification along transportation routes, water resource planning, energy conservation, how natural heritage hazards will be looked at, the natural environment protection and agriculture, waste management, and all of these relate to climate change. And a lot of what the province has done has been done to relate to climate change. Engagement process considerations. We want engagement of Indigenous people early, and now that we've framed some background reports, we have something to go out and talk to them about, which we'll be doing shortly. Carry forward essential information and direction. Clear understanding that one policy decision impacts another. Opportunities for council members to feel involved. Consideration and identification of the regional mandate, and broad-based and personal consultation are all elements of what we want to consider through the process. And we want to provide strategic facilitation where necessary. Moving forward, we want to comply with the Planning Act requirements, special council meeting and open houses, provide for broad consultation in the development of background studies and official plan policy sections, present to local councils to highlight the approach and invite involvement. That's why we're here today. And use Imagine Niagara information, which was an initial process where we were going to update the official plan to 2031. There was a lot of public consultation. It's now 2041 is the target objective, but the consultation is still quite relevant. So we want to use that to inform the consultation that we do now. And complete the regional official plan in sections for endorsement and consolidate the endorsed sections for council adoption. And we want to complete by 2021. You can see all the work we have to do. There's a lot of work beyond the key priority background studies that's been mentioned tonight. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. I wonder if members of council have any questions for regional staff on the official plan amendment? A couple of questions. The de-designation of urban, it sounds like that's something that the province added. Is there, how's that done? Is there compensation? Because I understood that planning is done and those rights are there, sort of development rights are there.
No, there's no mention policy-wise of compensation. So part of what we want to do from an urban boundary expansion, and Doug can jump in if he wishes, is, we have projects going on in Welland and West Lincoln for expansions, but we have a lot of other requests for urban boundary expansions. Some have come in under the provincial plan review, change this, change that. Others have just come in, and we want to set some criteria to discuss with the local planners to assess some of these and get them off the table in a sense. And we'll have to look at it. In judging things, there's municipalities that may not have enough land to 2041, but yet have pressure to expand. And you think, well, that's quite a legitimate thing. But for them to do it, there has to be a de-designation, but they can't do it in their municipality because there is not land to do it. So it'd have to be done elsewhere. And that's a very difficult issue. And then there's municipalities that have sufficient land. They might not just be in the right place. And they would have to rationalize those boundaries amongst themselves and then bring that forward to the region. So it's something we have to work out a bit of a framework for and how we're going to move forward on the issue of expansions, a bit more than the 2 municipal projects that are going on.
Okay, thank you. A couple of transportation questions. The presentation talks about, and you have the picture of the GO station there, but the transportation master plan that the region has doesn't really contemplate sort of the next step. whether it's bus, transit, transit-oriented development. Is that going to be in this plan, especially since this is supposed to be, you know, getting into 2021 and 20 years? So can we hear just about how you're planning to incorporate that when the transportation master plan really doesn't think about it too much?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think one of the key aspects of this plan that Dave touched on earlier in the presentation is the urban structure component of it, because basically the urban structure is going to identify the key growth nodes across the region, and it's expected that in those key growth nodes, that's where the sort of vision of complete communities lies, is in those growth nodes that are identified in the urban structure. That's where, you know, you expect the transportation stations, accessibility, you know, all of those aspects of transportation in those key growth nodes. That's where you get most of them, and then the connections to there. Depending on, you know, the challenge in Niagara is you're going to have a number of growth areas, and there might be a lot of distance in between them. So the challenge is, okay, how much circulation do you get with different types of transportation in there, and then what do those connections look like? So what we've done right now is we're just establishing, you know, what the urban structure might look like, because Niagara hasn't had an urban structure before. And then when we identify the urban structure, we identify those places that fit within that urban structure, and then from there you identify sort of all of the transportation and complete community challenges within those. Does that answer your question?
It's sort of, it's obviously something that we need to work on,
Yeah.
because other communities like Hamilton have an LRT, Ottawa has a, you know, those kind of things, because they've concentrated on these things. So it's something that, and I know council's talked about it in our secondary plan when it comes to East Font Hill, the idea of at least transit coming in, and our director is working very well on that to try to get that linked up with the regional system. So it's sort of the forward thinking. You don't, you know, if one doesn't plan for it, it doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen in the areas that maybe it could happen, and that development would be there. So I'm glad you're at least having a process.
And that's one thing we would expect, like the regional transit to come into the major nodes that are identified. You know, we have within each of these background study areas, you'll notice that there is a technical advisory committee that will be established. I don't know if it was presented here, but at Regional Council, we've said basically for each background study, there's going to be a technical advisory committee. So for some of these, like urban structure and a few others, there will be transportation people involved in that to say, okay, if these are going to be the main growth nodes in the urban structure, what does transportation look like to these right now? What is it going to look like in the future? But in order to do that, we also have to put in the population densities and look at how they're going to grow, you know, so they can get the sort of economies of scale to make those things work.
And that may help when it comes to urban boundary expansions. You don't need to expand the urban boundaries if you're increasing the density within those boundaries.
Correct.
The final one, and I'll try and put a local spin on it because of we're here at Pelham Council, and that, of course, is something we talked about. I think you were there talking about road widenings, automatic road widenings, a big issue for smart growth and infill development on regional roads, et cetera. And the answer then was sort of, well, we're going to work our way through that, and it's going to take some time. But here we are in our community. Will you be going to each of the communities and saying, you know, which road, what's your vision for these regional roads in the future? So Highway 20, there was an automatic road widening in front of the Pelham Yards, the old lumber yard here. But past Station Street, closer to Town Hall to the west, there was no requirement for road widening. And I think if you ask council or ask staff, they'd say, well, we didn't need it in the earlier section. So I guess my question is, how would you want communities to deal with that? Is that something that council can give direction to staff on to try to help formulate the community that we have and help build that community? So if you want to comment on that.
I think that's an important issue. One thing I can say is one of the reasons we're doing this review of the regional official plan is because there are a lot of policies in there. There have been a lot of things that have been done in the past that maybe, you know, with hindsight, you sort of look back and you say, did that, you know, at the time it was okay, but if we had the foresight, would we have made that decision? I think, you know, road widenings are one of those things where we don't talk, or road reserves, as they're called in the regional official plan, we don't talk to them, we don't talk about them as road reserves anymore. They are reserves to achieve complete street outcomes. So, you know, at the time, I don't even know, I don't know how recently the current table of road reserves was put in the current official plan, but you know, obviously decisions were made at a point in time for a particular reason. As we've said, conditions have changed now, so we do have to relook at those.
Yeah.
We're going to do that approach through the regional official plan. The hard part about the regional official plan is we know we're going to make, we know what direction we're heading in, and we know there are going to be made some changes that are going to be made, but it's going to take 4 more years to do. And meanwhile, development isn't going to stop, it's going to keep moving. So we do have challenges, and we knew that when we were going to start. That's one of those challenges that we have to look at and sort of try to work our way through it. But for a lot of these things, we won't have the final answer until the approval of the regional official plan, but we know what direction we have to work on.
Okay, thank you very much. Any others? Oh, Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions for you, if I may. As you were going through your presentation, one of the things that popped into my mind is I can foresee some jurisdictional issues cropping up. One of the arguments with that favors local area municipalities or lower tier government is that we have the boots on the ground, we're closest to the people, we have a sense of our community and what our community expectations are. And out of that, we, working with our professional staff, we develop a vision for our community and try and encase that in our official plan and our zoning documents. And yet now what I'm hearing is that the urban fabric is going to almost be dictated to some level by the regional government. And if your vision is different than the vision of a local area municipality, how are we going to reconcile that? You know, if you're insistent on your vision of the urban fabric and it's against what we have and what we've already encased in our OP, that how are we going to reconcile that? And in such a way that we both get what we want.
Thank you, Councillor.
Through the mayor, I wouldn't choose to use the word dictated. I think that what we're doing is we're working on a very collaborative approach with the area planners. You know, Barb has been involved in a lot of the discussions. All of these background reports that we're bringing to you and preparing the structure for, we've had quite an intense consultation process with all of the local municipalities. The process that we've been through is we basically have a lot of discussions at the area planners meetings that happen on a regular basis, and we've had a lot of one-on-one discussions. So when all these issues come up, we have gone out and we've said, okay, here's what we're talking about, here's the ideas that we're putting on the table. What do you think about them? Do they fit? And as you can see, Dave presented a number of dot points under each of the background reports that said this is what we're hearing. So what we're doing is a lot of these things that we're doing now, we're now required to do by the province. So the province has said at a regional level, we want you to do this. But we know that the answer isn't at a regional level, because we know there's 12 other municipalities, and you know each municipality has its direction that it wants to go in. So we're taking an approach that is very from my perspective, it is very collaborative, and I think over time you'll see that the directions with the regional official plan there's sort of three sort of directions that we want to head. The first is you have to provide you have to put in provincial policy requirements. So there's a high level of policy that's required. Then there are certain regional requirements that have to be put into that in terms of direction and guidance. The third one is we want to provide guidance to the local area municipalities. I think right now the challenge with the current official plan is it's a mixed bag of things. Is there are areas that are very high level and very general and don't provide much use to anybody. And then there's areas that get into a lot of detail and probably far too much detail for the level of a regional plan. So what we want to do is provide a very good consolidation of that. So it's provincial policy, regional policy, and direction to local municipalities where we can provide that.
Thank you. Councillor?
Along the same theme, I noticed there was a section in there where, and I think the regional policy or official plan already has some of this in it, but for example, the watershed is essentially it's overseen by the MPCA. How are you going to reconcile the official plan with the MPCA policies and their method of overseeing and working together? I know the MOU's off the table with them. How are we going to resolve all of that?
Right. Well, the watershed planning, initially when we started looking at the natural environment framework, we had watershed planning separate. But in discussions with area, and we knew it had to be done, but they're both big projects. So it's kind of like bite off what you can initially, right? But, you know, we had a lot of discussions with area planners, and we recognized the importance of integrating those up front earlier on in the process. So we've got the watershed planning integrated into the natural environment background study. So we'll be looking at all of that in terms of roles and responsibilities that will be worked out and what level of watershed planning will be required where. I mean, it's become a key factor in, you know, something like, especially urban boundary expansions, you have to consider it, but other larger growth areas. And then there's policies about watershed or sub-watershed planning and or kind of in-kind studies that have already been done. So there might be other studies of a similar nature or a combination of other studies of a similar nature that have that together fulfill what the watershed planning should have done. So that has to be taken in consideration. And the province just put out guidance material on that. So we're going through that now, and we'll be looking at that through the study, for sure. It's a good question.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. We still have another 4 years or so to go on this work, but thank you very much for giving this update. We'll see who shows up at the region on July 5th. Hopefully people won't be off on vacation, but they'll give us the feedback at that public meeting. We look forward to seeing you then. Thanks again for your presentation. Appreciate it. So it has been moved by Councillor Papp, second by Councillor Lane. Be it resolved, the Council of the Town of Pelham received for information the new official plan, Region of Niagara, high-level process and framework presentation provided by Dave Hayward, and Doug Giles. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thanks again, gentlemen. We appreciate your input and your presentation. If you want to stick around, we have another good news story coming up on the other side of your presentation, and that is by our chair of the Meridian Community Center Oversight Committee. And the clerk has popped up here and jumped down and is changing the presentation. So thank you, Madam Clerk, for doing that. Mr. Gibson, thank you. Great to see you again.
Well, very positive news tonight. I'm glad I moved in when I did. Because Diane and I can stay here now.
There we go. Perfect.
Yep. Ms. Holland is going to join us tonight.
Okay.
And I want to express our thanks to her. She is becoming more and more a member of our committee because as you go through the three phases of building, one's planning, one's the actual building, and then you have to take the thing over and you have to run it, and it's a very complex piece of equipment. And Kim has been saving Mr. Kersey and Mr. Sheldon and I the weekly construction meetings, and we thank her very much. And so she's been present every Wednesday? Tuesday. And sitting, actually working with Ball Construction and subs and all that sort of stuff as this thing is turned into a three-dimensional project, because she's the one that's going to run this thing. So tonight, whoop, just a minute here. Which one am I? Yep, okay. So, as you're aware, this was our committee, and we have, through value engineering, been able to achieve what we had set out to do. And just for your interest, over the next month, these are the activities that will be completed. And we are pretty confident that by the end of June, the project will be 99.9% completed, okay? And, yes, Councillor?
Volume.
Pardon me? Volume? Yes, sorry. My apologies. So, you've all been through the building itself, and you've seen, you know, the majority of the work done. This is all just little small stuff. You can see things like stair nosings. Well, you don't put stair nosing on till the very end because, you know, the obvious wear and tear. So that list right there, as presented to you, will show you that we are getting down to the minute, fine details of the project.
It's great news.
Financially, the cash flow, we got a debenture of 9 million in December, and another debenture in 12 million in July. We have a bridge loan of $3 million, which has all been discussed with you. So total cash flow at this point is about $25,670,000. And expenditures to the end of April, that's where we're standing right now, is the same amount of money. And the reserve is still at $951,776. Ms. Quinlan has provided us with the usual chart that I've shown you, that we are on schedule and that our cash flow and et cetera is well within what we had perceived as being normal for this project. So, Ms. Holland, would you like to talk to us about the operational maintenance after we get the community center built?
Okay,
Mr.
thank you,
Mayor,
Mr.
members
Gibson.
of council and staff. So one of the questions that's been coming up recently is, okay, so now we're going to have occupancy, then what happens? So in terms of operational maintenance, I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes and give you sort of some highlights of how the next year and a half, couple of years, and down the road is going to roll out. So generally speaking, all of the equipment is warranted for a minimum of 1 year. So during that first year, it's very important to work with the existing contractors that have installed that equipment and got it commissioned with you, the owner. And so for the first year, because most of the perhaps breakdowns, if there are any, or repairs, so to speak, will more than likely be warranty items. We will be utilizing the contractors that have installed and commissioned the equipment to date. So that's sort of the first year. At the same time, however, we do need to secure maintenance agreements with some of the same contractors, and these are for regulated type things. So, for example, elevators, refrigeration equipment. That's a TSSA regulated type of equipment, so you have a separate contract with those types of pieces of equipment. So we'll also be doing that in the next, immediately, as soon as we have occupancy. Some of the facility staff, including myself, will also have access to the building automation system, which is commonly referred to as a BAS. And this is for the community center. So this will immediately identify any equipment failures. It will identify, for example, sort of out of range readings. So I'll give you a couple of quick examples. If the ice temperature should change more than 5 degrees, we'll get a text or an email. if the exhaust fan in the second floor men's washroom fails, you're going to get an email. So that's called a building automation system. This is new to the town, but certainly not new in facilities management. Very, very common for a building of this size, and I certainly can appreciate what they've done for me in the past, and it's instrumental, really, to the success of this building operation. So we'll have full access to that as of occupancy, which will be discussed in a minute. So then, by early to mid-2019, we will have established a comprehensive preventive maintenance program for the building. So this is always based on the manufacturer's recommended guidelines, and it's for all of the building equipment, and not even just equipment, but finishes as well. So, for example, the obvious ones are mechanical equipment, electrical equipment, refrigeration, but it also includes kitchen equipment, overhead door maintenance, a variety of life safety issues, as the sprinkler system, for example, fire devices, gym flooring, that has to be refinished every year. So that's on a preventive maintenance program. So all of that will be added to our current preventive maintenance database, which was shared with council, I believe, last year. So that will just be continuous work, and that should be up and obviously ready before that 1-year warranty time frame. So in order to actually get the preventive maintenance done, we will have contractors secured, and of course, when you hire contractors, then you also need to, as staff, oversee those contractors and those functions. And so we'll have them secured. They will perform the preventive maintenance items, and because we don't have the staff currently in-house to complete that work. We do have on staff one tradesperson who's very, very clever, very talented millwright. And he currently oversees all of the maintenance for the town-owned buildings, 20-plus buildings, and now, of course, as well, the community center. So, and he also looks after capital projects. So we will, we do plan to revisit the area of facility maintenance staffing for the upcoming budget year. But that's sort of the 10,000-foot summary. Any questions?
Okay, well, I thought we were going to ask questions at the end, so let's turn it back over. Thank you, Ms. Holland, and then we'll turn it over to Mr. Gibson, and then we'll see if there's questions from members of council.
Well, I only have, as you're, I'll skip this slide, it's just the names of the people that have been supporting us, and of course, as I said earlier, Ms. Holland has been kind of integrated into the team. We're going to be on time. Occupancy by the town will be June the 4th, 2018, as planned. Occupancy isn't just handing over the key. That is a legal term that has to meet certain legislative building requirements and that sort of thing, and we are in the process, and Ms. Vicky will be given the keys to her new office, and she'll be able to occupy July 4th of this year, as planned. Congratulations. And we're going to be in budget. We are just in the final throes of establishing this. We do confirm that we will be inside the budget that has been allocated to us. As you're probably aware, we're always a couple of weeks behind from where the bills came in and when I'm reporting to you. So what we're planning to do is, in the first council meeting in September, we will be able to give you an exact dollar amount as to what the project cost, and right down to the more or less the penny, right? So,
Great.
We're on time, we're in budget. Now, questions. And Councillor Durley, you have been asking me this question for the last two presentations, and we are now ready to present it. Now, I have a list here, and I will give the list to the town clerk, and she can include them in the minutes. But if you will bear with me, I'd like to read through the 10 or 12 companies that are local and the amount of money that we have put back into the community with this project. First company is Foster Wheeler, $75,000 contract. Rankin Construction, $549,000. Touchstone Site Contractors, $238,000. Salit Steel, $450,000. Sassini Masonry, my apologies, $2,500,000. Bradshaw Iron Works, $578,000. Black Creek Metal, same amount, $578,000. Niagara Commercial Coatings, $331,000. Yarnell Overhead Doors, $35,000. Star Tile, $625,000. Contour Architectural Coatings, $442,000. Brock Elevators, $284,000. Group 92, $875,000. Eco Electric, $2,900,000. Nearly 1/3 of the cost of the center was awarded to local contractors, and the total amount is $10,461,163. There you are.
That's great. Thank you very much,
I
Councillor
hope,
Durley.
Councillor, that I'm sorry for the delay, but we were awarding contracts and we now know.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Bill, you're in your committee on a scale of 1 to 10 has done a 14 job. Fantastic. Really pleased to hear these numbers, and I'm sure it's heartening to our local economy and to our local workforce. That's a lot of stuff that's come back into this building, and from here, the benefits will be even more once this thing opens and gets being used. I'm sure that through Ms. Holland and her group and through Vicky, it will be well used and it will be well appreciated. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for that update. Other questions for our presenters from members of council? Councillor Lane and then Councillor Powell. Councillor Lane.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question on the outside of the building in regards to the
Square.
landscaping. I'm sorry, I just had a senior moment there. The landscaping, will the landscaping will be done, or is that still to be put out there?
Most of it will be completed around the perimeter of the building. Further out is will be integrated into what comes next door.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Powell.
Sure, very quickly, great job, and glad to hear on budget, on time, and more importantly, I guess, the ongoing preventive maintenance of buildings is essential. You cannot let the building, because we've built something here that I presume will be 30, 40, 50 years that it'll last. So you're looking at, through you, Mr. Mayor, to either Bill or Kim, you're going to look at contracting out to various I guess, services to ensure that these services are maintained on a long-term basis or short-term basis?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Basically, what we usually do, and we do it today, is the contractors, for example, for HVAC maintenance of our current rooftop units or any of our HVAC, is awarded through the, well, obviously through the purchasing policy, but so we have one contractor that does our HVAC for the town today. So when this comes up, this is a much larger scale, so we'll work closely with purchasing to ensure that process is followed again and award it accordingly.
So what I'm hearing through you, Mr. Mayor, is that you will send it out for tender, and notwithstanding the fact that those that are capable and relevant to be able to handle that, that's very important. Some people bid on projects and can't handle that. Yeah. Through you, Mr. Mayor, when the final cost comes in, always with buildings, I've had some experience with YMCA's, there are deficiencies, right? So what you're going to do is, what you're going to give us is the final cost, notwithstanding there will be some things that need to be fixed up. Is that correct? That, or is that over and above that?
Our intention is the final contract costs,
Right.
everything included.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. I'm satisfied, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Councillor King and then Councillor Kersey.
That's fine.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this really is very exciting that we're near the finish line. My question actually is directed to Ms. Holland. You were mentioning the contracting of services for the preventative maintenance, kind of at that annual basis, but on a daily, weekly, monthly kind of inspection basis, who would that responsibility fall to?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Depending on what the item is, so for example, we have a partnership with our fire prevention officer who does our monthly fire device checks. There are some staff internally that do other sort of light checks, but quarterly, for example, a quarterly filter change on an HVAC unit, that's going to be done by a contractor. But replacing a squeegee on a floor machine every 6 months or 3 months, depending on use, that would be done internally. So it really, I hate to evade the answer, but it is determinant really on the complexity of the preventive maintenance item. Because the list, the database for preventive maintenance is as detailed as a squeegee to a rooftop unit. So, you know, it's difficult to, it's a combination, really.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I mean, I had sort of two reasons for asking that question, but my one main reason, aside from the safety factor, would be whether that's going to be done by current staff or whether there would be opportunity for new staff hires.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So we are going to look at that, as I mentioned, for the budget season, but we do have, you know, we have a licensed millwright as our tradesperson who's more than capable of performing much of the work and has tried in the past, but simply due to volume, that's not possible now. So there are some jobs certainly that that could for sure be done internally, and others, you know, that need to be contracted out. Very specialized things like refrigeration equipment. Certainly that's something we would want done by a third party.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kersey, you've been very patient. Go ahead, sir.
No problem, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. My question is not so much about the substance of the report, but about one of the graphics, because I've gotten to know this guy and he doesn't do anything except for a reason. So with indulgence, I'd like to understand why you've used the stamp on your graphic on the last two slides.
Oh,
You
thank
could-
you,
If
Councillor.
you could comment on that.
Okay. There's a number of us in this town that contribute a fair amount of time to supporting this town and the place we live in and trying to make the place better. And early in the process, our committee was referred to as a rubber stamp. And the other gentleman, Mr. Sheldon, and I took exception to that remark. Mr. Sheldon and I could be doing this for another community or another operation and probably being paid $1,000 a day easily. And it just rubbed a bunch of us that volunteer, Summerfest and some other things. So I just thought, well, I've been rubber stamping this for a long time, so it's on time and it's in budget. Okay, so that's the reason for my rubber stamp, sir. And I want to prove to you that if you are a rubber stamp, you can produce a 3T volume building.
I knew there was a reason.
I'm sorry about that, if it offended anybody, but.
No, it's absolutely, thank you very much. And just to echo the comments, we are so appreciative of your work and Mr. Sheldon and Councillor Kersey and all of the staff that have been involved in this, and
Ms. Teresa, too.
Ms. Quinlan, Ms. Holland, but also our contractor, Ball Construction.
Yes, definitely.
And the subcontractors, the local contractors. So this really is a project that so many are involved in and have had that vision to make it the best community center for our community. And we appreciate each of you, your dedication and your support and your hard work to get us this close to the finish line. And that finish line is coming up.
Yes, it is.
So some folks in the community have asked, they said, okay, it's going to be substantially complete. You're going to get the keys and occupancy and whatever those terms are in June. What happens between now and September? I think maybe you've talked about it before, but it's always, I think, refreshing now that we're this close.
Okay.
I don't know who wants to answer that, but
Well, as far as the committee's concerned, we have been Ms. Holland and the committee have been meeting, and we've been talking about the transition over. Actually, this works out very well, having occupancy this early and it not entirely being finished, because then the town staff can enter the building legally and can then start to interface with people as they finish the project off. As Holland had said, we're standing there, and the person that installed it is now going to train the staff on how to operate it and warranty conditions and all that. So we've been kind of slowly handing it off, and it's been a planned process. Obviously, I come from a public sector property maintenance background, and I built a lot of buildings, courthouses, and those types of things, and one of the features that is not always envisioned is, okay, we built it, now you got to run it. Well, in this particular case, the town, through Mr. Ottaway and his team here, we've always considered, well, okay, this is a complex building, here you go, Kim. It's not like that. It's been, as I pointed out, Kim's been attending all the construction meetings, so she's been there when the first nut and bolt went in, and so she knows where they all are. So if you would like to add to that.
Okay, Ms. Holland, what happens over the summer? The staff get in there, get used to it. Just give us a bit of a flavor of what occurs over the summer and leading up to, you know, the usage in the fall that we expect, and kind of that big bang of usage.
Sure. So for that, there's about a 7-week window from the time staff gets those keys, shall we say, or that occupancy, to the very first function, which is very large. So during that 7-week period, you have staggered move-ins. So there's 2 departments moving in, of course, so we're staggering that a little bit. We have FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, and equipment, being delivered, installed, commissioned through that period as well, along with prior to that. It's starting at the end of this week. Things like signage going up. And then probably most important for me, or one of the most important things, is the user groups themselves that have licensed space in there. You know, they need that time as well to get set up, to transition, to, you know, bring in their wares and train their staff, just like, you know, as well we need to be doing. So we have 20-odd part-time staff that we're going to be training. So lots to do. I could probably go on, but let me show you.
No, that's helpful, I think, for the community, that that there's going to be that transition, and then getting ready essentially to, although there's an event in July and other activities going on, you know, things have to occur before you kind of get that grand opening, which will be in September. So I appreciate that. Once again, on behalf of council, thank you very much, Mr. Gibson, for your work, to Mr. Sheldon and other members of the committee. We appreciate the oversight and the handoff to Ms. Holland and other staff. So thank you very much, everybody. It's just, everybody's looking forward to this project coming to completion, and we're very pleased that you're more than a rubber stamp.
Thank you.
And now the stamps that you're hitting are the right ones that people were looking for, that it's going to be on time and in budget. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So it has been moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Pat. Be it resolved, the council receive the presentation from Mr. Bill Gibson and Ms. Holland regarding the Meridian Community Center Oversight Committee regarding an update of status of the new Meridian Community Center project for information. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. I spoke earlier about patience. We've had another group of here that's been right from the start, who's been very, very patient, and I don't know if they need to get up and stretch, and I almost need to get up and do the boogie or something. But thank you very much. We have members of our Pelham Public Art Advisory Committee here. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Can you? I feel too tall for this. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Mayor and Council, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you very much for establishing the Pelham Public Arts Committee. Sorry, Public Arts Advisory Committee, and would like to take this opportunity to update you on some of the things that we have made progress with since our first meeting in January of this year. Council appointed this group of residents to be the Pelham Public Arts Advisory Committee for the term of the council. Many of our committee members are here tonight, and I would like to take this opportunity to introduce the committee members. I think we're almost all here. First of all, our councillor representative is Peter Papp, who you all know. My name is Diane Gibson. I'm acting as chair of the committee. I'm a textile and mixed media artist. I've been teaching workshops and exhibiting in juried shows for 30 years plus, I guess. Those of you who have been into the regional headquarters might have been aware in the atrium of the new building is a large 24-foot installation, which was my piece that was commissioned and donated to the facility. And in 2012, I was head of the Cultural Capital of Canada project. When you leave the cafeteria and walk down the hall, there are 14 lovely textile and mixed media pieces that I helped coordinate. I didn't do the work, but I helped with the project. So I have a love of textiles. Our vice chair is Else Swart, who's a longtime working artist, a longtime resident in Fonthill, and has been known for her watercolor work, teaching at the library, and an organizer of the annual Pelham Arts Festival for 30 years, just about, almost. Our secretary is Jenny Dean. Maybe people that are behind me can stand up. She's a working artist, current owner and director of Cabaret Youth Theatre in town. Our mayor's youth advisory representatives are Ava Colangelo and Natalie Anderson, and I don't think either of the girls were here tonight. Mary Powley is a working artist, current president of the Pelham Arts Association, and a past board of director member for the Niagara Arts Gallery. Christina Drummond is a new resident of Fonthill and a working abstract artist. Alison Cottingham is a longtime resident, fine arts and art history grad with particular interests in painting, pottery, architecture, and design. And our staff liaison is Jody Hendricks and Vicki Van Ravensway. So you can see we have a variety of backgrounds and a lot of experience and talent that I think we're bringing to the committee, and we're certainly all keenly interested in seeing more public art in the region. Once we were appointed, we were able to hit the ground running and have been meeting the second Wednesday of every month. Recently, we were able to make use of local volunteer resource B. Clark, who helped us to facilitate 2 meetings and helped us to develop our goals and a strategic plan for the rest of this year and beyond. From our strategic planning sessions, we've developed 3 goals. Goal 1 was communications and outreach. We want to make sure the residents understand our goals and the initiatives by developing a concise message about the role of the committee and the importance of public art in Pelham. We want to engage residents in discussions about public art at community events. We will utilize social media to convey information and images about public art, and also to engage businesses and schools in discussions about public art and how they can be involved. Goal 2 is a goal that will take some time and research and support from staff in order to implement, and that is establishing a process for selection and evaluation of public art. In order to achieve this goal, we hope to develop the process to select and recommend artworks, including identification of the evaluation criteria for public art, such as aesthetics, costs, assessment, insurance, maintenance, etc. And that would be for donations, purchases, rotation of arts, and decommissioning of art. We also will identify and inventory space suitable for public art, and we'll keep an inventory of all current and future public art in the town of Pelham. Goal 3 is to research and identify funding opportunities. We'll be looking to secure an annual budget from the town of Pelham to help support the work of this committee. We'll also be researching and identifying and reviewing public sector and private sector funding opportunities. And we'll be exploring the opportunities to integrate public art into capital projects in the public realm. So on behalf of the Pelham Public Arts Advisory Committee, I'd like to thank you all and for establishing this committee, and we look forward to helping implement some of the goals that we've listed.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We certainly appreciate each of you being here and your service on the committee. Public art is something that's extremely important, and that's why council wanted to establish this and did that public art plan, master plan for that. So I'm going to open it up for questions from members of council for the presentation. Councilor Papp, is there something you wanted to add as a member of the committee?
I can tell you, I thoroughly enjoy working with this group. They probably thought, who was this goofy, crazy Hungarian coming here to work with them? And they thought, and Madam Chair, you did a fabulous job. She was a little worried about making presentation to council. I said, don't worry about it. It'll work all good. The main thing is that we've clearly identified, as you can see, some attainable goals and things that we want to work on, and we will work together with our citizens, members of council, the staff, to ensure that the appreciation and the eclectic vision of public art is invested into our community. And you've always heard me use the reference to Richard Florida. When people look for where they want to live and work, they look for the creative side. They look for things that have been done, and we are done many, many things. So I look forward to continuing on with this group, and I support their work wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Councillor. So, I'm sorry, Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one little question. You mentioned there's funding. You'd be looking for fundraising, and then you're also looking for a budget from the town. How much funding is expected to be necessary, and when would you start needing this money?
Don't think we've exactly pinned anything down yet. We've only met 4 times, so that's 4 hours of meetings maybe. But we just see down the road that we'd need some basic budget for printing. I don't know. Vicki, can you add anything to that?
Ben Ravensway, are you able to assist the councillor at this time, or is it premature?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. The committee will be working on a budget and setting their needs for 2019 so that they can achieve some of their goals.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question, if I might. Under one of your goals here, it talks about establish a process for selection and evaluation of public art, identify an inventory space suitable for public art. We were, the CEO just indicated, when one travels to various communities, you'd see public art in so many places and locations. It could be in squares and parks, or it could be on the streets with crosswalks. It could be on private property as well, and I think we have a development in what I call Uptown Font Hill that has the intention of having a mural there. Can you just give us a flavor for this inventory of space suitable for public art? What's the concept that you're thinking about there? How broadly are you thinking that?
I think fairly broad right now. Like we have been thinking crosswalks and smaller pieces, big manhole covers. It doesn't, and school involvement, I think definitely want to get kids involved. And it doesn't have to be permanent. It could be a temporary installation, something that's maybe only there for the summer or something seasonal, but get people involved.
Yeah, good. So it's everything from that to the larger
Absolutely.
installations. Yeah. Okay. That's great. Great to hear. I'm glad because sometimes people think about it and they just think about a statue somewhere and that's it, or a large installation, but it could be so many things, right?
Right. We all decorate our homes to a taste that, we like paint and color, and it could be a living wall of plants. It doesn't have, we've got all these agricultural places here. Put a little sign, compliments of or sponsored by, and it could be a green space. It doesn't have to necessarily be a bronze statue or a fountain.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thanks again for your work. We look forward to you continuing, and sorry you're kind of at the end of the presentations here, but we do appreciate your work and hearing more from you, and especially as you're putting that little bit of a budget together and putting some little bit more specificity on the details that you presented to us this evening. Thank you again. We appreciate it. So it has been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor King. Be it resolved, the council receive and endorse the Pelham Public Art Advisory Committee strategic plan and goals for 2018. Any comments or questions? There being none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thanks again for your work. We appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great evening. It's been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley, that council receive the report from Regional Councillor Beatty for information regarding the regional report. Comments or questions? Councillor Pop.
Quickly through you, Mr. Mayor, could I request from you that we can get an update on the opioid program work at the region?
Okay, we can do that. There's been, these were in April, so there have been other updates since then.
Send that.
Yep.
Thank you, that's all I ask.
Okay, thank you. Clerk can remind me of that. Write it down here. Thank you. Anything else? Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have adoption of minutes. It's been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor King. Be it resolved, the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. Minutes of the special council meeting of May 7th and of the council meeting minutes of May 7th, 2018. Any errors or omissions? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Now we have consent agenda items to be considered in block. Are there any items that members of council would like to lift for separate consideration? Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to lift 9.3.3. Firstly for discussion, but it may precipitate a motion depending on the answer. So.
Okay, thank you. Any others? I'm wondering if we can lift recommendation 14 under recommendations arising from the Committee of the Whole for council approval. So that's under 9.1. Recommendation 14 is regarding the requesting the region for those for the dollars for the audit and the legal fees. Any other items? Okay, thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Lane. Be resolved, the following consent agenda items be received, the recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable. Presentation of recommendations arising from the Committee of the Whole and the Special Committee of the Whole for council approval. Be it resolved that council approve the recommendations arising from the Committee of the Whole meeting of May 7th, save and except for item number 14. And the Special Committee of the Whole public meeting under the Planning Act of May 14th, 2018 is presented. Under 9.2, we have the minutes approval of those meetings. Staff reports of routine nature for information or action. There are 2 items because one's been lifted. Sorry, there are more than 2 items. There's 4 items. The 2017 audited reserve year-end balances, the 2017 year-end building department report, the Brock University student UPass transit agreement, and information on the Niagara College student UPass transit agreement. We also have information correspondence items, the Niagara region regarding the stakeholder consultation engagement on proposed collection services, and that item be referred to staff. The District School Board of Niagara Community Planning Partnership Annual General Meeting, we're receiving that for information. Town of Oakville resolution regarding CN intermodal update. The Township of Wainfleet resolution endorsing the request for appointments to the process for the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. The City of Thorold resolution regarding the CN rail development in the town of Milton. And then finally, committee minutes for information, the Pelham Seniors Advisory minutes of April 4th, the Pelham Public Art Advisory Committee minutes of March 22nd, and the Meridian Community Center Oversight Committee of April 10th. Are there any questions or comments regarding any of those items? Pleased to see the Niagara College and Brock University, so thank you to staff for negotiating those, and I see we have the bylaw later on our agenda. So I'm going to call the question on those items. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. There were a couple of items that were lifted. Councillor Kersey, you start under 933, the first quarter financial reports.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a couple of questions regarding Appendix 3, specifically Appendix 3. And specifically the canceled and red circled projects. So through you to our treasurer, Madam Treasurer, I presume since we didn't receive the funding for the Pelham Street, that we will most likely not be proceeding with that at this point?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct.
And in addition, we were looking into the asset management system that was put out by Ontario Good Roads and various colleges that they've been working with. How are we proceeding on that? Are we engaging that program, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we are. We are working with Marmac and the Ontario Good Roads Association. So we've actually met with them twice already, and it's moving along really well. And so this is the one that is free for smaller municipalities.
So I guess the direction I'm going, and I'm going to ask this question then, I went back and looked at our budget, and there were some significant cash components to several of these projects that have been redlined or red circled and are not proceeding. And I got thinking about the report that we received from Spreet and Company at our last meeting. And I wondered if you could advise whether you felt there would be sufficient cash, given the status of these projects, that we might undertake that work this year in 2018. And I'm thinking specifically of the 3 culvert option in the $350,000 range.
Let's see if the treasurer is able to assist the councillor.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I think what the councillor is asking are the unused portions of these projects. Is there sufficient amount of money that would cover the $350,000 for the Poth Street? Is that the question?
That's right.
Yeah, the answer is yes.
So I guess, Mr. Mayor, where I'm going with this is, with this line of questioning is, we have sought long and hard to find a solution to the Poth Street issue. We've had significant public requests regarding Poth Street, and now we've identified the fact that, given that we're not proceeding with some of these projects, that we might be able to take a good hard look at Poth Street, get some the Spreet option engineered and hard, fast numbers brought forward to this council, and if in fact they are within that budgetary range, that we could undertake that work and get it done in 2018. So I don't know how you would like to proceed with this. I would be willing to make a motion that staff be directed to engage with Mr. Spreet. He did indicate that he already had some engineering drawings done for other projects, and that he would be able to bring forward a firm budget for us to consider. I think it'd be a worthwhile undertaking, and might be an opportunity for us to take care of one of the infrastructure issues that we have in our community and that we've put on hold.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. My understanding and is that we're going to be getting additional information from Mr. Spreet through our director. So I want to hear a bit of an update from since our last meeting. I don't know if the director can provide this. Are you able to assist the councillor any further in terms of an update? What's the, sort of the timeline going forward? I understood that Mr. Spreet's estimate was an estimate, so.
Exactly.
Ms. Clemencio, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a quick update.
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. Spreet and Associates was out last week doing survey work as promised. So they surveyed the site and they surveyed some upstream culverts. So with that information, he has enough to go forward with design, although we haven't given him the green light to do that, because that would be a larger undertaking than what we had the budget for. So the survey work was completed. If we'd like to give him the green light to go ahead with this alternate design, and we can issue the PO for that. I'm just not certain about how to work that with red circled funds, but we could work that out internally with the treasurer. And then at that time, once his design's complete, he'd be able to do a proper construction estimate that would be much closer to a real amount. Right now, it's quite preliminary.
Okay, thank you. So is there an estimate on the design costs?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no. We had an estimate for this preliminary work only. So that's with him now, and we're going to get that information back. Once I touch base with how the surveying went, I can ask him for a firm estimate on the design that we're interested in going forward with that this year.
Okay, so it sounds like, although the councillor wants to move ahead kind of this meeting, probably what would be in order is if we give direction to staff to say, look, let's get the consideration for the design, see how much that costs and what that might look like, and maybe come to the next council meeting. If we can give that direction as opposed to taking a chunk of money from here that when we may not know that that's the amount, it might be less. Hopefully it's less.
I'm quite happy, Mr. Mayor, to move forward in baby steps, and
Yeah.
if that gives confidence to council to move forward on this, I'd be happy to support that.
Okay.
So that we can get a firm price on designing. The implications from Mr. Spreet was that he had a significant
Yes,
portion
he
of
did
that
say
already
that.
done,
Yep.
and drawings already done, so I'm not anticipating big money, but it's worthwhile to maybe nail that down for confidence. So I'd be willing to make a motion that, or give staff direction to that if council would support me on that.
Mr. CEO?
That direction would be appropriate, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so if we can give direction, if that's okay with council to come back to council, to staff, to come back to council with an estimate of what that might look like if Mr. Spreet can pull it off the shelf, as he did indicate.
Yeah.
He's done some project, and he actually named the locations where he
Yep.
could use them, and if they can come, if staff can come back to us at our next meeting with that. And also the director also indicated she wasn't sure the mechanism for taking red circled funds, and so if staff can work together with the treasurer to figure out a mechanism where that might be done and make a recommendation to council, would probably be prudent. Okay, thank you. Councillor Lane, to that
Yes, thank
concept?
you, Mr. Mayor. I just think timing would be
Right.
important too. I mean, maybe we're in a wet season, maybe something can happen in September or whatever, so that would be an important part of the equation, I think, is when this job could be done based on weather and whatever else that goes on with it.
Okay. Ms. Clemencio, do you have timing information now, or is that something you'll have to get back to us on?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, typically our timing for permitting in this type of work is July 1st through September 1st. But being a municipal drain, there's a little bit more leeway there. And that coincides with what's typically a dry season. And doable, when I talked to Mr. Spreet the last time we spoke, that should something change and we wanted to go forward this year, summer construction is possible. It's really just the tendering process that takes the longest, but certainly possible.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Are those the items you wanted to raise on that
Yes, Mr.
issue?
Mayor,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you. Anything further to that direction, Councillor Pat?
By all means, Mr. Mayor, very quickly, that all the logistics and components related to Bell Street be brought forward to our June 4th meeting and a staff report, that including all those things that you mentioned, so that they be laid out and that it be put into a decision mode that we either give the green light or,
Perfect. Absolutely.
Sounds like there might be a couple of green lights. The first green might
I agree,
be
Mr.
to
Mayor, but
say, here's
lay
the
out
cost
game
to
plan.
design.
Yeah.
If that's approved, then,
Then we,
and it'd be helpful to know the timeline, I
yep,
guess is what you're
exactly,
saying
that's
as
what
well.
I'm getting at.
Okay, thank you. Great, thank you very much, Mr. CAO, as long as that's noted. Thank you. Anything further on that first quarter financial report? Councilor Percy? So it has been moved by Councilor Papp, second by Councilor Lane, that we receive it for information, and embedded is that information, looking for additional clarity regarding Poth Street. So I'm going to call the question on the receipt. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. The next item, I asked this to be lifted, and this is I believe it's number 14, the first 14. There were two 14s in this report, and it's the recommendation that Committee of the Whole receive the CAO's report for information, and the Town of Pelham make an attempt to recover the costs associated with responding to the Niagara Regional Audit Committee and the Regional Council resolutions as outlined by the Chief Administrative Officer in his April 2018 Committee of the Whole report. At that point, I raised this issue with Council, and we had a discussion at that point, and I indicated that I would be seeking public comment, and I think we received a few comments from members of the community. I did put it out on social media as well, and I wrote a column about it last week with some information, and got a very robust conversation from members of the community. More than 50, nearly 60 people got back to me, specific writing back to me directly in those various modes, whether it's social media or email. And in addition, there were more than 100 likes to the concept. So, that's a pretty robust conversation in terms of what people were suggesting. Some were saying absolutely get this, get the money back. Some suggested we ask for an apology. Some suggested withholding the regional taxes so that we could just take it out of that. Some suggested divvying it up with various folks that have been involved in this. The region, former councillors, citizens, media, etc. Some suggested a cost, lawsuit. A couple suggested apologies, etc. Though the ones that struck me were the no's, because with each of the no's there was some feedback on it. Some of the no's said no, take the high road. The no said no, lead by example. Another no said no, stop the back and forth. And I think that speaks to what the minister had said. Another email had talked about that as well, saying, take the high road, stop the back and forth, and really, and I was kind of reminded by I think it's a quote that, I don't know who said it, maybe I'm just making it up, but sort of a gentleman doesn't ask for an apology. And I think maybe this is the time when, or a gentlewoman, apologies, Councillor King, but maybe this is the time where this council should take the high road, where this council says, you know what, we've had enough of this back and forth. Let's stop this now. The minister indicated that we should be talking to the region instead of firing things back and forth. And so I put it to council that I think we should not approve this recommendation, despite the fact that so many people said, yes, absolutely, they wanted to get this. But I think those no's have caused me to pause and to think differently about this. So I open it up to colleagues for some feedback from councilors now that we've had a couple weeks to think about it and talk about it in the community and listen to what residents and businesses are saying. Councilor Durley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I received several emails and conversations as well about this, and I think a lot of the people that are saying yes are using emotion in this particular case, and I too was victim of this as well. I think what was done was what was not right. I think it probably bordered on, I'll use this strong word of criminal, but it just, to me, was pointing out the same answers 14 different ways, and I don't think there was a need for it. However, I think if we stoop to fighting back or throwing stones back at that it's just going to open up the whole situation again. And there appears to be a certain little group at the region that's leading this attack on us. So I think we should just let them rest, because they've done a lot of work over the last 16 months, not doing their work at the region, but trying to do work around here. So I would agree that although I would love to reciprocate and get back at them, I don't really think that's the way we should go. I think we should just let this go. We have proven beyond a doubt, 100%, that there was nothing wrong that happened. The people that made the accusations have to agree with this, have to accept this. I think we should say the case is closed and get on with the business that we need to get on with, and hopefully the region can do the same. Communication goes both ways. You have to listen and you have to speak. We're ready to speak. I hope the region is ready to listen, and I hope that we can get some, as Mr. Morrow said, we need to work together, and hopefully they get that message. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor King.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I concur with my counterpart here. The notes that I have, really looking at it in hindsight, two wrongs don't make it right. And it is all about communication. And the unfortunate part of it is that we were maybe running on a knee-jerk reaction, acting emotionally. The unfortunate part of the whole thing is that when we were communicating responses, they weren't listening. So I would hope that they can rise above it, because I am willing to rise above all of the accusations and follow the recommendations of the minister, which were to work together. And I think that if we're going to follow through on what we had previously discussed, we're putting that barricade back up and not attempting to work with them. And those are my comments.
Thank you. Others? Councillor Lane?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just reiterate what they said. I think it's a no-win situation right from the start. I felt that all along, that you're not going to win. Even if you win, you're going to lose. Okay, for the sake of $100,000, $200,000, you're going to win. You're going to be fighting a battle, and at the end of the day, you lose big time anyhow with the region. And we should start to mend the fences somehow. I don't know. There's a handful down there that are against us, and you're probably never going to win that battle with them. But in the big battle, I think enough's enough, I believe.
Thank you. Any others? Councillor Papp?
Well, you're right, all of you, that we sometimes speak from emotion and we get caught up. But the reality is, we did spend this money, and we were put in a position we had no alternative. Having said that, as I mentioned to you before, the region's not going away. There are a lot of good people there that do support us, and they do, along with their constituents. And this is just a storm that we had to go through, unfortunately. I think we've sailed through it, and we stand tall, and we hold our humility and our trust, notwithstanding the fact that it cost us money. It may come back in other ways as we move through a collaborative process. I think you know where I'm going with this, that as time moves along, I'm hearing about the regional official plan. There will be things in there that we could benefit from. So I concur that we withdraw this and particular recommendation. But I think we have to keep it always in the back of our mind, that this money was not just about money. It was about, as I mentioned, I don't have to say, intrusion into our local affairs. And that is something that has to be recognized, and what I'm pleased and proud is that our other colleagues in the municipalities have recognized this as well. So leave it alone, the brave and those that stand up and are humble enough, and that we are. We made our point, let's withdraw it and work towards some sort of, whatever that may be, a mutually collaborative and hopefully influential way of working together. And who knows what will happen after October, November. Maybe they'll see that we're willing to be, not going to say, make amends. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to speak against withdrawing this recommendation. Quite frankly, as a taxpayer and as a councillor, I'm offended by the fact that another level of government has forced us to spend 1.5% of our tax base, 1.5 points of our tax base on nonsense. And if we add in town staff time, we're probably closer to 2.5 points. So I see this as not taking the high road or the low road. I view it as a practical road and as sending a message to the region. If you meddle in other folks' business, there's a price to be paid. They were clearly, it was very clear, their own legal team advised them that they were outside their jurisdiction. And yet they still proceeded for 1 full year to force us, in order to defend the town's honor, our staff's honor, and our council's honor, to spend taxpayers' money that we would not otherwise have spent. Similarly, I think it's important that we take a position to say to them, if you meddle in lower tier areas of jurisdiction and it results in a cost to that jurisdiction, then you should be willing to pay the price for your meddling. So, Mr. Mayor, I don't see it as a high road or a low road. I see it as a practical thing. I think it's imperative that we stand up and be counted as a council, that we had to put ourselves and our staff and our professional team through what we had to go through for the past year. And I will vote against lifting it to represent those members of the community that feel that this motion or this recommendation of committee is appropriate, as a voice for them to say, region, look at what you're doing. Now they've finished with us. They're going after the city of St. Catharines. Who next? Welland? Waynfleet? Who's next? So if no community stands up and takes a stand and boils it down to numbers, I'm sure Mr. Quirk understands numbers. He's assured us that he understands numbers, that he understands more about numbers than the top two firms in Canada. I'm sure if he understands $165,000 and they have to pay it, he's going to get the message. So I will vote against it, Mr. Mayor, of changing it. And I'd like a recorded vote on that, if possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So just for, I appreciate council's feedback and input on this. And I think I'm just going to confer with the clerk about the way in which to deal with this. So I've lifted the matter. There's really two matters. We're not talking about the for information part, but really the resolution. So Madam Clerk, my belief would be that we would have to vote against this if we didn't want to do it, or if Councillor Kersey wanted to go ahead and proceed, that we would vote in favor of it. Is that how you're reading it as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would suggest that the motion be divided, that you vote on the receiving for information as one component, and then if you want a recorded vote, we would present the motion as it's stated, and we'll take the recorded vote, and the motion is either carried or defeated.
So if Councillor Kersey, you want to support the recommendation here at number 2, is what you would say, and then others, as they've talked, may not support that, so.
So there won't be an alternative motion to this to
No.
remove this?
No.
Okay.
It
so
would just
I'll
be
vote
this
in-
motion.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So I lifted the whole thing, so let's have a quick vote on receipt of the CAO's report for information. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously, thank you. And now the second recommendation, or the second part of that, is that the town of Pelham make an attempt to recover the costs associated with responding to the Niagara Regional Audit Committee and Regional Council resolution as outlined by the Chief Administrative Officer in his April 2018 Committee of the Whole report. And there's been a request for a recorded vote, and I'll let the clerk handle that.
So if you are in favor of the motion, you would state yay. If you are opposed to the motion as stated, you would say nay. Councillor Kersey.
Yay?
Councillor Durley.
Nay.
Councillor King.
Nay.
Councillor Lane.
Nay.
Councillor Papp.
Nay.
Councillor Ribbiak is absent. Mayor Augustine.
Nay.
The motion is lost.
Thank you very much. The motion is lost. I need to sign that.
Yes. So, item 14, and I'll call it 14A.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you. One item was removed. Now we'll carry on with the rest of the agenda. One item was removed from the agenda, and that was 11.2.1. So now we move on to presentation consideration of bylaws. Been moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Papp. Be it resolved, the Council of the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass the same, and that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. Bylaw number 3997, 2018, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into agreement with Brock University Student Union regarding the use and outlining the service levels for student UPass privileges for the Town of Pelham Transit System for the period of September 1st, 2018 to April 30th, 2019. Similarly, we have bylaw 3998, 2018, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement with Niagara College Student Administrative Council Incorporated respecting the use and outlining the service levels for student UPass privileges for the Town of Pelham Transit Services for the period of September 1st, 2018 to April 30th, 2019. Questions or comments regarding these? We certainly appreciate work of staff, and as I mentioned, are working together with our partners with the student unions on this essential service for many students in our community. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor King, second by Councillor Durley. Be it resolved, following bylaw be read a first, second, third time and passed. Bylaw number 4000, 2018. To adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of Council of the Town of Pelham at its regular meeting held on the 22nd day of May 2018. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carried. And the final motion for council has been moved by Councillor Durley, second by Councillor King. Be it resolved, this regular meeting of council be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for June 4th, 2018 at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. This meeting is adjourned, and we'll have a 5-minute recess before we start committee. Thank you.